America painted. That was his dream. And
well, we've got a good lineup this week. This is a great segue. Being spring, we're going to go from birds to wildflowers. Lee, welcome. How was your trip to Florida?
It was fine. 5 days in Disney with a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old can make you feel your age, that's for sure. But we had a great trip.
And then one husband that acted like an 8-year-old.
What? Now the real 8-year-old and a real 6-year-old. My son and daughter-in-law. My son pretty much acted like about a 15-year-old, I think, on the trip. But we had a good trip. The children were surprised. They didn't know they were going. And but the standing in line, even at 35% capacity, the standing in line was still rough. You know, we stood in line a lot for 5-minute rides.
Thank you, Mary Kay. We'll see you next week on James Audubon Part 2. Bye. Hey, Lee, I don't know if you were listening to the earlier part of the show when Gillian Dumas was with us, and she was touting the works of Florence King. Are you familiar with Florence King?
Yes, I am. Florence King was a funny woman. And a lot of her observations of Southerners were fairly accurate. She was probably a little more conservative than to my taste, but I remember one thing, and I don't know which of her books it was in, but I've remembered it for a long time, that she talked about that people enter a house, but Southerners enter a house, I'm not sure what the word she was, on streams of conversation or something like that, that Southerners come into a house talking and probably never shut up, you know, after that. But she was very funny, and I think her books are pretty easy to find. I never read a lot of her columns in National Review, but some of her early books were very popular for a while, and you know, we all read them and laughed about them. Cool. So yeah, I do know who she was.
And what do you have for us this week?
Well, I have flowers for us this week. I didn't know much about wild plants when I was growing up. I camped a lot with the Girl Scouts, but we seemed to be more concerned with identifying poison ivy than anything else. I knew goldenrod because it was Alabama's state flower until Lurleen Wallace changed it to the camellia. But after Bob and I were married, we would go to his father's family's home place outside of Calhoun. And while the house and the barn were in ruins, there were wooded areas that had a lot of early spring wildflowers like trillium and hepatica, woodland phlox, shrubs like sweet shrub and cat's paw. And my father-in-law, and of course these were his plants, so he thought he could do as he pleased, and I guess that was true. His method of transplanting was pretty much to just jerk that plant out of the ground, stick it in the car, take it home, dig a little hole, and put it back in there. And I guess it worked, because I have a 40-year-old sweet shrub that started out as a little stick that's about 5 feet wide now. So I think his system probably did work. But many trips to North Carolina mountains provided an education on wildflowers and native plants. And little by little, we expanded the wilder areas in our yard. I don't have entirely wildflowers. I have a lot of hybrids as well. But, and I'm not a botanist, and I prefer common names to botanical names. And I'll probably make a lot of mistakes on wildflowers today. But originally, of course, all flowers were wildflowers. And going back, let's start with Shakespeare. Let's get a little literature in here. Most of us are familiar with the litany of blooms that Oberon describes to Puck when he's describing Titania's sleeping place. Eglantine, and Alan, if you'll show number 1, which is a picture of print of Eglantine. That's it on the left. It's a kind of rose, also known as sweetbriar. The other side is golden ragwort, which we have gracious plenty of around here. Eglantine, woodbine, which is honeysuckle, wild thyme, violets, and of course in Hamlet there's Ophelia's mad scene where flowers and herbs send messages. I think we all recognize rosemary, that's for remembrance. Pansies are for thoughts. Columbine for insincerity. Rue for regret. Daisies for innocence. I was in Disney World last week, and as part of the Flower Festival in Epcot, there's a Shakespeare Garden in the UK area, and many of these flowers show up in that. It was really very, very pretty. The language of flowers, which tells you what the blooms symbolize, was popular in Shakespeare's time, but probably reached a peak in Victorians, and even today, brides may choose orange blossom for purity, lily of the valley for pure love, and pink roses for happiness. And a lot of books were written on the language of flowers, particularly in the late 1800s. Wild plants were, of course, used for medicinal purposes. Alan, if you'll take that down, I'm going to hold the book up. Okay, this is a recent paperback copy of Culpeper's Complete Herbal, which originally came out as the English Physician in 1652 and then became Culpeper's Complete Herbal in 1653. Nicholas Culpeper was something of a rebel. He believed that the poor should have access to medical care, mostly by treating themselves with the assistance of his books. He was against procedures such as bloodletting, which was extremely popular, but he also used astrology as a determining factor on what herbal remedies to use for particular diseases. His book is still in print, and I've sold a few later editions, not an original, which goes for a lot these days. I found one that I think was about $5,000. But I've known people whose approach to medicine is of a herbal nature, who still refer to Culpeper's as the really definitive book on this type of medicine. The lure of wildflowers has remained through the years, as a profusion of books testifies. One of my favorites is How to Know the Wildflowers, written in 1893 by Mrs. William Starr Dana, illustrated by Marion Satterley. And this is number 2, A, B, and C. Alan? Or just number 2? There we go. I didn't crop that very well. This is not the first printing. The first printing had a few color plates in it. This is the year of the first, but it does not have the color plates. And but it does have, if you'll go to the next one, it has the drawings by Satterley. The book was written, Mrs. Dana's husband died of flu a few years prior to this, and she sought relief from her grief by long walks in the country, accompanied by her friend Satterley. And the book grew out of that, though she did consult a lot of botanists. This was not just her observations, but was a well-researched and was a surprising bestseller. The book went through a number of different printings very early on and influenced another writer. Most of you are probably familiar with Margaret Armstrong because of her Art Nouveau book bindings. And she wrote a book influenced by Mrs. Dana's book called The Field Book of Western Wildflowers. And this is a recent copy of it. First edition of it going right now for around $800 or $900. And she illustrated it herself. And so the drawings in here, which are, from, if I can get it to where we can see them, or which are from her this is west of the Rocky Mountains, are from her trips, are done from life. and it's an interesting book. A lot of other wildflower books followed. The Museum of the State University of New York published a great big 2-volume work in 1917, and that's number 3. Alan, that had color plates, and then well, that's still from okay, here we go. That one, and then I have a picture from the interior of it. There we go. That is a picture of northern twin flower, which I'm not familiar with. I have twin leaf in my yard, but I'm not real sure what that is. But about 3 years after the books came out, they did a folder of just the color plates from the book, which I'm sure a lot of people framed and things like that. If you can look behind me, if you'll take that down, I brought down, if you can see behind me, some color plates from an 1894 book of wildflowers that I picked up at a flea market in tatters. I mean, the covers were off, the pages were stuffed in a plastic bag, and so this book was not demolished to mat these prints. But we were doing a couple of antique shows, and it seemed like a good thing to have. They were nice decorator items, and so I still have some of those. So I brought some of those down to show in the background today. Let's see, the next. The next one, number 5. If you're going to consider raising wildflowers, you're going to have to, that's the Wildflowers of New York. Just go on. This is pinkster flower, which is a wild azalea, native azalea that grows in our area, though primarily up in the northeast Georgia mountains and in the North Carolina and Tennessee mountains. But I do have some in my yard that actually were propagated here in Calhoun by a friend who raised wild azaleas. Go on to the one that's got several books. There we go. Thank you. These are books that I use for identification of wildflowers. And if you're going to consider using them in your yard, you need to know what you're dealing with. And when you see things out in nature, you need to figure out what it is you're looking at. The orange book, Wildflowers of the Southeastern United States, which was published by the University of Georgia, is a really good basic guide. It was originally written in the 70s, and I know that the botanical names of some of these have changed over the years, but I've used this book for years and make notes in there of where a flower was seen, just to kind of document what I'm seeing. A more recent book, Wildflowers, Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and Southern Appalachians, actually extends down into North Georgia as well. And I got it. I belong to the Georgia Botanical Society, and they do field trips. And this was purchased, and the author was, one of the authors was one of the leaders of a field trip to Roan Mountain up in Tennessee about 4 years ago. And it's a very, very good guide to southern, to Mid-South and Appalachian wildflowers.
Lee, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of fun. It's kind of like some people are bird watchers and other people are wildflower watchers.
Yes.
And you keep a record, keep track of the ones you keep, just like birders do.
Yes. I also keep a journal in the car, and on trips we'll write down where we went, what was in bloom in the yard at that time, and what was seen on the trip. And I had years and years of journals like that. Haven't been much done in the last 15 months or so, but again, we will some other time.
All right. Well, you're going to stick around and join us for a little round table at the end of the show?
Sure, I can. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Lee. Welcome back. Looking forward to you. Are you coming back next week?
I don't know. I've still got pictures of the ones in my yard.
Well, why don't we schedule you back
You
on
want
for
to do
next
that for
week?
next week?
We'll go with the vernaculars.
Okay, that'll be fine. That'll be
Very
fine.
good. All right. Okay, folks. Not everybody can be with us live every week, and some of our regulars send their portion of their segments in via pre-recorded segments. Usually that includes, almost always that includes David Hess of the Bookman Bookstore in Orange, California. He's been a bookman for decades, and all that time he's been finding things inside his books as he opens them up and cleans them out and gets them ready to put on the shelves. So here we go with David's pre-recorded session of things found in old books. Right after that, we're going to have Gigi Best joining us with the benefit of anthologies. Gigi will be with us live after this next segment. Folks, I think we might have lost some of you a little while ago. We seem to have about a 3 or 4 minute blip in the show. And if that happened, we're not sure why. It could have been the service provider. Or it could have been a Facebook thing, but we're glad you're back with us and we're able to log back in as you did.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California. Wishing you a good afternoon and thank you for joining me for my segment on things found in old books. I found a few interesting items this week that I'd love to share with you, and we should get started right away. In this little Catherine Coulter paperback, I found a couple of photos. They are rocket launch photos, probably taken, they're hard to see because they're not real professionally done. There's somebody with a little camera who stood on a shore far away from where the launch was and took photographs of the launch. And on the back, it's dated 12/19/05. That's the processing date. So I'm thinking that the rocket was probably around 05 as well. I believe it was a satellite launch, possibly. But what got me thinking when I found these pictures from 05 was that it not too long after 05 did the everybody taking a picture on their cell phone and cell phone photos only. So the hard copies are kind of lost. So I think that finding old photographs in books is not going to be around too much longer. There's nothing to put in the book anymore, unless you take a photograph on your phone and put it in your iReader. I don't know. But anyway, so I don't know. This might, finding photographs in books might be a lost item, because in my course of finding things in old books, photographs have been one of the many things I've found in old books. And so this is 05. So there might be the trend downward for finding photographs in old books. And on to the next thing. Just a teacher-child book for parents and teachers. I found, and it's interesting to me because what it is, it's an injection record. And it's interesting to me because of what we're going through now with the pandemic and people getting their vaccine. So this is a vaccine card, or not a vaccine really. It's for tuberculosis, actually, a TB test. And it's dated 1972. And a little blurb about what the test was. And the card, that many people online are taking pictures of the card now. This is done by Kaiser. It's in the left forearm, upper. And then they got their TB test. And I probably didn't take a picture of it and share it anywhere. They just stuck it in this book. They were just done with it. So I found that interesting only because it was a card of an injection. On to the next thing. We have in this beautiful, gorgeous book on Utah, published in 1922. It's a lovely book. It's really gold leafing and decal edges. It's very well illustrated. I found this bookmark. Again, the bookmarks are relatively common, but this one was called the Pig and Whistle. The Pig and Whistle bookmark. And doing a little research on the Pig and Whistle, it was a restaurant / candy store, and it was started in the turn of the century, 1909, and its heydays were through the 20s. And they had a Pig and Whistle out here in Hollywood, and apparently it was next to the Grauman's Chinese Theater, and all the stars would go to the Pig and Whistle. And the bookmark is really quite striking. It's obviously from the 20s, and it's beautiful to look at. It's great artwork, and it's quite a unique little item. And on the back, they tell you a bit about what's in the candy, and then where their locations are: Los Angeles, Pasadena, San Francisco, Oakland, and Seattle. So it was a West Coast outfit. So they probably didn't have many Pig and Whistles back there on the East Coast. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous bookmark in a gorgeous book. And lastly, on my finds of the week, the Experience of Literature, kind of a heavy tome. And in this heavy tome, right in the front part, I found this. What it is, it's a picture of the Archaeological Guatemala Tour. And please accept this souvenir of your trip with our sincerest thanks for flying Pan American. We hope you will think of Pan Am when you're discussing plans for your next trip. By Zenith Travel, a travel agency. And in the bottom is a picture of everybody who went on the Guatemalan archaeological trip, a souvenir thing. That was a little picture of the world on the front, and it was mailed to this person, and they lived here in LA, in California, and included with that is from the Hotel Guatemala Biltmore, just a list, I think, of the people who were there in the trip, with little side notes, I think, of their spouses or whatever. And it was from the Hotel Guatemala Biltmore. And this actually came, I didn't mention the year of the picture, it came here in 65. So this is from 1965. And I'm assuming this is 65 as well. Thank you for stopping by this week. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next week. And let me add, if you have anything that you found in old books that you would like to share, send it to oldbook, no S, oldbook at ebookman.com, and include a little blurb about what it was and where you found it, and we hope to include it on this segment of the show. I appreciate you tuning in, and hope to see you again next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it got me looking at the notes. We're about to move into, thank you, David. First of all, thank you very much, David. We're about to move into the poetry section of the show with Gigi Best, and I was just bending over reading the comments. I asked all of our listeners in the chat text, did anybody want to praise a poem, since we're moving into the poetry section? And we've got one here, The Wreck of the Hesperus. Yeah, okay, maybe we'll have that one for next week. I think we could find that one recorded online by some eloquent, deep baritone voice. But first this week, Gigi Best with us, the benefit of anthologies. We haven't seen her for a few weeks. She was away. Gigi Best is a genealogist and founder of the Best Richardson African Diaspora Literature and Culture Museum in Tampa, Florida. Gigi, I would like you to tell me the title of your book because I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce Thomas the Melungeon.
Melungeon.
Melungeon. Thomas the Melungeon, free person of color and Civil War soldier. Welcome
Yes.
back, Gigi.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. I just want to say hello to everybody. And I know we've been talking about poetry and we talked about individual poets a lot. Um, we talked about historic poets. And what I wanted to talk about today is because there's so many people, um, poets, that to me, the best way to enjoy them, and I learned this in graduate school, is to have an anthology. So I'm going to show you a couple of small anthologies. This is one that's African American poetry, and it's from 1773 to 1927. So if it's saying 1773, it probably starts off with Phyllis Wheatley. And then I have another one that I really like. It's called Native American Songs and Poems. So this one is edited by Brian Swan, but it's another one of these small ones. Back when I bought them, they were like $1. So they probably cost a little bit more now, but there's information you can get out of these poems. Now, this particular book, it's called Black Southern Voices, an anthology of fiction, poetry, and essays. So this is a really good book. And it has Frederick Douglass, Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, Maya Angelou, Albert Murray, Nikki Giovanni. So you recognize some of them are poets, but some of them are essayists. And so this is a really good anthology. My favorite period is the Harlem Renaissance. So this particular book, it's called The Portable Harlem Renaissance Reader. And people probably know the editor, David Levering Lewis. And his name is on a lot of these books. And it has Romaine Bearden, W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, James Weldon Johnson, Elaine Locke, Richard Wright, and others. I mean, a lot of the women, Zora Neale Hurston, Nella Larson, Wallace Thurman, Jean Toomer. So if anybody else is a avid Harlem Renaissance lover, then this is a really excellent book. This is an older book. This one is actually called Dark Symphony, Negro Literature in America. So it has poems and essays. And I think this was copyrighted. Let me look at the copyright date. This was actually copyrighted in 1968. So the amazing thing is when I look at some of the newer anthologies, I realized that there were older anthologies, that were done a long time ago. And the people in the Harlem Renaissance knew all those authors. Um, Arna Bontemps is a very prolific person, and he writes a lot with Langston Hughes. So this one is called Caroling Dusk, and it is an anthology of verse by Black poets, and it has County Cullen, Arna Bontemps, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who's one of my favorite. He has a poem called The Negro Love Song that I love, and it's written in dialect. And it's like, seen my lady home last night, jump back, honey, jump back. Loved her hand, loved her, and squeezed her tight. Jump back, honey, jump back. Seen her smile, a little smile, and a light gleam from her eye. And it's a smile go flitting by. Jump back, honey, jump back. So that's actually, I mean, I paraphrased it, but it's a wonderful poem, and it is so awesome when you start repeating it. We know Jean Toomer, and it says other poets of the 20s. So, of course, that's the Harlem Renaissance again. I like a lot of the talks we've done lately have been about women poets. And so this book I've had for a while, and it is, let me see what the copyright date of this one is. 1990 by Rutgers University. And the interesting thing about this book, when we talk about women poets, it's Wild Women in the Whirlwind. So it's Afro American culture and the contemporary literary renaissance. So this is women poets, and it has Angela Davis, June Jordan, and I have a signed poetry book by June Jordan that I got when I was in. She visited my Morgan State University when I was in graduate school. I also have some signed books by Nikki Giovanni and one by Maya Angelou. Um, so they had a lot of editors for this book. And Henry Louis Gates, who we all know very well, was one of the editors of this book, Wild Women in the Whirlwind. I love that title. And so the last one I'm going to show you is called Crossing the Danger Water. 300 years of African American writing. So this has poems, essays, various articles. So this is another one of my favorite books. So anybody want to say anything or?
I would like to say that Gigi, you are probably the wildest woman in the whirlwind. You whipped out that poem. I just sat here mesmerized. Jump back, jump back.
Jump back, honey, jump back.
Jump back, honey, jump back. I am going to commit that one to memory before the day is out.
Yeah, that's Paul Lawrence Dunbar, and it's called the Negro Love Song.
The Negro Love Song. I got to get that. And what's his background? You said he was part of the Harlem Renaissance period?
Yes, Paul Lawrence Dunbar was actually considered one of the early writers during the Harlem Renaissance. There was almost two periods of the Harlem Renaissance. So people like James Weldon Johnson, W.B. Du Bois, they were all in the early part of the 20s. And then later on came Langston Hughes and Countee Cullen and some of those other writers. In fact, I have a picture. Hold on a second, right in back of me, Countee of
whose life was too short. Too many of these great poets and literary artists we lost before they even made it to 50. And
Yes.
just imagine of the anthologies of their own work that could have been written.
And so here's Paul Lawrence Dunbar here.
Oh, wow.
Very distinguished looking man. And so he has several poetry books of his own, but I've always really liked him.
Well, back then you probably only had one chance in a year, maybe in a lifetime, to get your picture taken. You made the best of it.
I know, definitely. Langston Hughes has been photographed a lot. Yeah, Langston Hughes has.
He's looking smooth there. All right. How's the museum going, Gigi?
It's going really well. And I did a new edition of my book. I updated it and I did a revised edition. So I've been speaking a lot at different Zoom calls and functions. And my book has had a resurgence, and so people are buying it again, and I'm excited, really
Okay.
excited about that. I was
Very good.
trying to see. Go ahead, keep talking. I'm looking in.
Who's the publisher on that? And we can make sure we go out and find it.
Which one?
And your book.
Huh?
On
Mine?
your book.
Oh, mine. Okay, it is. I'm the publisher.
Oh, okay.
And yes, and if somebody wants to purchase it, they could go to bradlcmuseum.com. bradlcmuseum.com. I actually have, you can get it from Amazon, but it's better to get it from me because people can request me to sign it and I can sign it and send it out to them. But on our website, it's very easy to order, very easy.
Excellent. And that's Thomas the Melungeon?
Thomas the Melungeon.
Thomas the Melungeon.
The Melungeon.
Melungeon. Free person of color and Civil War soldier.
Yeah, Civil War. And when I did the update, it's Civil War and Revolutionary War patriots because I have both Revolutionary and Civil War. Oh, I see they just put the address up there.
Yeah.
I was trying to see, I was trying to look in this real fast and see if I saw, I did see some James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Paul Laurence Dunbar. They have him here on page 36. Oh, this book right here, Dark Symphony. This one actually gives you the biographies of the different writers. So this book is really good to have because you know, a lot of times you want to know a little bit about them. So this book gives you information.
What made them write the way they did? Absolutely.
Yes, and it also tells you about their life, you know, and what was going on in Harlem at the time. You know, now Harlem has been gentrified, and so just keeping that history is something that I think is really important, that we bring those writers, keep them, you know, even though we're getting a lot of the young writers, we have to realize where did they get their inspiration. And when you talk to when Amanda Gorman has been interviewed, she talks about Maya Angelou and some of the other writers who influenced her. So I think if we go back and read some of those writers, I think we will be very surprised at some of their works.
Thank you, Gigi. That was wonderful. You stay in the whirlwind.
Okay. Thank you so much. Everybody have a blessed day. Okay.
Right. Keep smiling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, welcome back. We're getting close towards the end of the show. We're going to finish up this week's show. Before we do, with a bit of recorded poetry, and we had a few of them lined up. Frost, Sandberg, Shel Silverstein, Ogden Nash, Maya Angelou, Amanda Gorman, and others. But we only have time for one. And I think we're going to go with one that is just an American author to the heart. 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner, 2 times for poetry, Carl Sandburg. The other Pulitzer Prize was for his Abraham Lincoln series. Here's Chicago by Carl Sandburg.
Chicago by Carl Sandburg. Hog butcher for the world, toolmaker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling city of the big shoulders. They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I have seen your painted women under the gas lamps luring the farm boys. They tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, it is true. I have seen the gunman kill and go free to kill again. And they tell me you are brutal, and my reply is, on the faces of women and children I have seen the marks of want and hunger. And having answered so, I turn once more to those who sneer at this my city, and I give them back the sneer and say to them, come and show me another city, with lifted head, singing so proud to be alive, and coarse and strong and cunning, flinging magnetic curses amid the toil of piling job on job. Here is a tall, bold slugger, set vivid against the little soft cities, fierce as a dog with tongue lapping for action, cunning as a savage pitted against the wilderness, bareheaded, shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, rebuilding, under the smoke, dust all over his mouth, laughing with white teeth, under the terrible burden of destiny, laughing as a young man laughs. Laughing even as an ignorant fighter laughs, who has never lost a battle, bragging and laughing that under his wrist is the pulse, and under his ribs the heart of the people, laughing, laughing the stormy, husky, brawling laughter of youth, half-naked, sweating, proud to be hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and freight handler to the nation.
My live here? Got my mute button on? No, we're good. Sorry about that. Wow. The emotions we've gone through today in this show. It's been so lighthearted. We've been deep. We've been shallow. We've been long. It's a great show today. Lee, is Lee still with us? I've got a challenge for you, Lee. You think next week you could bring us a poem about wildflowers?
A question. Do we have time for me to ask her a question?
Oh, yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead. I'm giving you a challenge. You think you could bring us a poem about wildflowers next week?
I can do
Okay.
that. Sure.
Good. Go ahead.
Gigi,
Yes.
Dunbar chose to write mostly in dialect,
Yes.
which was kind of odd for, say, a Harlem Renaissance writer. Was this a way to sell more, to get his work to more people, or what do you think his reasoning behind that was?
Well, I think he wrote early enough that he was closer to emancipation and how he believed that the enslaved spoke. Now, when you talk about dialect, there were issues with Zora Neale Hurston because she was also an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist.
Right.
So a lot of her work wasn't accepted, or people had something to say because they thought she shouldn't speak like that. But she was a very educated woman.
Right.
And the thing about her that really amused me is my favorite book by her, when she talks about tea cake and she talks about the gophers. And my husband's from Florida and I'm from Jersey. So I thought gophers were little furry things. And so he told me that gophers were turtles and people eat gopher soup. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And so when I read it in her book, I was, their eyes are watching God. I was so fascinated by the gophers. But she brings you, when you read that book and it goes through the hurricane and everything, and she didn't write like that all the time, and but she was very close to the culture. And I think that's the thing with Paul Laurence Dunbar. I don't think he was trying to please anybody at the time. He was writing what he felt.
Right. Well, I love his books. I've had a lot of them, and I've I like the way they flow. The way the way it flows. But they are beautiful. But yes, I will find a poem for next week.
Wildflower.
Okay, but I also we didn't get to this. This is
What you got there?
The annual for the Georgia Botanical Society. It's called Tipularia, which is a wildflower. The picture on the cover is actually a Western wildflower from a field trip that the society took in 2018. But the article in here, and I wanted to mention this since we were trying to be literary about this, is about the flowers at Andalusia, at Flannery O'Connor's home. So, Larry Baker, if you're listening, this is for you. But there's a nice article in here about everything that grows at Andalusia. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Very good. All right. Anybody else have anything to add before we close out the show? Next week, our show, we're going to have Jen Johnson with us. Jen is managing the West Coast Book Fair from San Diego to Seattle, out to Albuquerque, up through Denver. A couple of weeks ago was the East Coast Fair. Coming up is the West Coast Fair. The East Coast Fair had more than 5,700 visitors and over 400 items sold. But the interesting thing about the West Coast Fair this year are the number of seminars that they have lined up in the days leading up to the fair, Thursday, Friday, and then on Saturday when the fair opens. The seminars, and this is as much an educational event as it is a book buying experience. Also with us next week, Barbara Lowe is going to be back. She's one of our regulars, our Victoria Ephemera collector. Lee Lynn will be with us, Lynn Thompson, Mary Kay is going to be back, and some of the regulars and some new book arts people. We just continue to have all of the fun. Finally, I'd like to point out, everybody stick around to the very, very end of the show because Alan has put together a great new ending credits with our names and what we do and where we are in case you want to get in touch with us. And finally, the music is from Kevin MacLeod. It's called Gas Lamp Funworks. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap for the Rare Book Cafe this week. We are the book lovers' rendezvous where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free.